If you've ever been curious about how massive historical movements actually organize themselves to survive and scale, well, this is exactly what you're looking for. Because, this wasn't just some haphazard group of friends. This was a marginalized movement surviving hostile empires by using a brilliant 2,000-year-old organizational blueprint. Today, we're unpacking this organizational architecture straight from our source material, which analyzes the ministries of the Apostle Paul's top two guys.
Okay, let's jump right in by challenging our modern mental image. When you hear the words church or pastor, what pops into your head? It's probably one building, a huge parking lot, and a single pastor preaching every week, right? Because that's what we're used to today, it's so easy to project that modern image backward onto history. We naturally just assume historical figures like Timothy and Titus were early versions of today's local pastors running a single congregation. But as our source material reveals, that assumption is entirely wrong.
And this really highlights the paradigm shift. Back then, there were 0 church buildings, literally none. The early church lived entirely in living rooms. It was this massive network of sprawling, completely decentralized home churches. So to think of Timothy and Titus as isolated local pastors completely misses the sheer scale and honestly the danger of what they were actually doing. They weren't running a quiet building on a street corner. They were managing powerful, fast-moving networks in a highly volatile ancient world.
So, here is our roadmap for how we're going to systematically rebuild our understanding of this ancient blueprint today. We'll cover 1, the modern myth, 2, the 4-level blueprint, 3, pastors versus delegates, 4, the blueprint in action, and 5, the enduring structure. Starting right off with part 1, the modern myth, reimagining the foundation.
Moving right along to part 2, the 4-level blueprint, the engine of growth.
To really understand this engine of growth, we have to look at how Paul the Apostle actually operated. He didn't just start small congregations, walk away, and cross his fingers hoping for the best. To protect these super vulnerable new churches, he built a highly organized 4-tier system. It's essentially a clear, almost corporate-style chain of command. At level 1, you have Paul, the founding apostle, starting churches from scratch. At level 2, his delegates, Timothy and Titus, functioning as regional apostles to organize entire territories. Below them, at level 3, are the elders or pastors. Those are your local house shepherds. And finally, at level 4, the deacons, the practical ministry helpers. This 4-level structure is the true secret behind their survival. You see, without that level 2 layer of regional delegates managing things from above, those level 3 local house shepherds would have been instantly swallowed up by the theological chaos and the pagan cults of the ancient world. They absolutely needed that high-level protection. Which brings us to part 3, pastors versus delegates, understanding the divide.
This is where the true genius of their organization shines, and it all comes down to an extreme difference in scale. Local pastors handled the everyday, intimate care. They were stationed in a single living room, managing a tight-knit community of maybe 15 to 30 people. They handled the everyday relational issues. But apostolic delegates like Timothy and Titus, they were mobile executives. They roamed across hundreds of miles of dangerous territory. They held ultimate executive authority over vast regions. They weren't just church staff. They were high-level regional managers sent in by Paul to enforce order, correct deeply entrenched problems, and, most importantly, fire bad leaders and ordain the new level 3 local pastors. One managed a living room. The other managed an entire territory. To truly grasp the gravity of this regional delegate role, think of them as the ultimate gatekeepers. Timothy, for instance, literally held the keys to the entire church network in the massive city of Ephesus. It was a deeply spiritual, intensely administrative role. Through a rigorous process historically known as the laying on of hands, he had to interview, background check, and vet candidates to make sure only highly qualified individuals ever gained influence over a local house church. The stakes were incredibly high. If a delegate rushed this process and accidentally ordained a fraud, well, they essentially let a wolf right into the sheep pen. And historically, the delegate who ordained them was held directly, personally responsible for whatever structural damage followed. This 4-step workflow shows exactly how a delegate operated as a structural architect rather than just an everyday shepherd. It's actually really helpful to compare them to a modern corporate fixer or a specialized consultant brought in to restructure a failing branch. Paul would start the churches, right? But after he left, things inevitably fell out of alignment. Chaos would creep in. So the delegate was deployed for step 2, completely overhaul and fix the systemic problems. Then, step 3, officially ordain local leaders to maintain that newly fixed structure. And finally, step 4, watch over those networks to ensure safety. They were literally setting broken structural bones back into place. Moving into part 4, the blueprint in action, focusing on Ephesus and Crete. Let's look at this dynamic duo in action by exploring the staggering geographical and cultural scale of their specific assignments. So Timothy was stationed in Ephesus. We cannot underestimate what Ephesus was. This wasn't some sleepy ancient village. It was a massive, staggeringly wealthy capital city. It was the hub of the Temple of Artemis, literally one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was completely swamped with occult practices, immense trade, and confusing false teachings. Timothy was dropped straight into this chaotic, hostile environment to act as the ultimate regional manager over dozens of decentralized home groups. He wasn't there to hold hands. He needed military-level commands to silence wealthy false teachers and bring an entire citywide network under control. Meanwhile, consider Titus's assignment over in Crete, a rugged 60-mile-long island territory. In the ancient world, Crete was fractured into 90 different isolated cities and held 250,000 people. It was a major shipping crossroad with an absolutely notorious reputation. Historically, the people of Crete were literally famous for being pirates, rowdy mercenaries, and dishonest swindlers. The culture was dangerously chaotic. A simple local pastor, equipped only to teach a weekly living room gathering, could never have managed this massive, fractured terrain. Taming an island of pirates required serious, high-level executive authority. To actually manage this huge, multi-ethnic pirate haven, Titus had a monumental mountain to climb. First, he had to somehow find and choose decent local leaders from scratch in every single one of those 90 cities. Then, act as a bodyguard for these new churches to protect the truth and shut down seasoned con artists. He had to establish the theological baseline by teaching sound doctrine, systematically shape a violent culture step by step, and finally, be the ultimate role model amidst all that chaos. He executed this massive 5-part overhaul with the full executive backing of Paul. And finally, part 5, the enduring structure and apostolic masterclass. Bringing it all together, we can clearly see how this blueprint was brilliantly designed for rapid, sustainable expansion. Even though they faced completely different geographic scales, Timothy in a hyperdense, wealthy metropolis and Titus roaming a rugged 160-mile island, both men executed the exact same high-level task. They weren't there to just preach a nice weekly sermon. They were sent to set broken historical structures back into alignment and establish regional order. If you take away anything from this explainer, let it be this core truth. They were fast-moving, high-level apostolic leaders sent directly by an apostle to lay solid foundations and protect sprawling networks. These leaders weren't sitting quietly behind corporate desks. They were the dynamic force driving a highly connected, beautifully organized movement. They were true regional architects. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. When we strip away our modern assumptions, it completely shifts how we view historical movement building. If a decentralized network spread across highly hostile territory could thrive and outlast empires on this precise 4-level framework, what would happen if modern organizations applied that exact same rigorous chain of decentralized command today? What could a modern gatekeeper model achieve? It's something truly fascinating to think about. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning those assumptions.